Saludos amigos, los invitamos a escuchar la mesa redonda de Roundtable, donde discutimos los temas del día, hablando de política, educación y otros temas, locales, regionales y mundiales, por USA la Radio.
But there was no Republican outcry for anything because in 2017, Mr. Trump put a bill through to cut taxes for the richest people in America. And then he went to Mar-a-Lago and told his people around the table, I just made you a lot of money. So that's what he did. And there was zero in that bill that was directly given to the people. And that's the contrast with this. The bill put by President Biden, approved now by Congress, and the contrast is amazing because there's so much money dedicated directly or indirectly to the poor. Incentives, a check, a personal check for those making a certain amount of money. If they qualify, they'll receive a check from the government. So that's one thing. Another one is more vaccines and more money for vaccines, more money for distribution and so on. All in all, it's a true aid to the economy, not to the 1% of 1%. That was that money that was given as a break, no taxes to Amazon and all the giant companies. So that's no social justice with that. But we see so much of that was become inured to that kind of situation. Anyway, COVID still causing a record number of deaths, but only because each day we add more to the over 500,000, more than half a million people who died. But also, there are two competing things right here. Let's see, somehow we should win the race in favor of humanity, in favor of saving more and more lives. We should win that race. Competing between the virus, the spread of the virus, and the vaccination. The more people vaccinated, the more we acquire that herd immunity. Herd immunity, meaning that because there are so many people infected now, there's some sort of immunity as happened with the common flu. Um, but in the meantime, we are being told by the same doctors who told us, who predicted accurately what was going to happen if we did not obey certain rules, if we did not use masks, wash our hands, distancing, all the stuff that they recommend. So it's Fauci now. If you look back at surges, if you look at the number of cases in this country plateauing at a level of 60 to 70,000 cases a day, it's too high. And so he doesn't think that's a positive thing to have. West Virginia governor criticizes the governors who lifted restrictions when we are not far away from being able to ease restrictions currently, getting out of this COVID era. We may still have to be wearing masks after most people are vaccinated. 4 to 6 weeks, new variants could slow the process. The UK strain has invaded the United States. That has to be watched because to find out if the vaccines are effective, etc. That's called the V117, I think. And we could do well if we continue with vaccinations, if more people get vaccinated. And speaking of that, we know that there are some inequities in the system. The case of Florida, where the Governor DeSantis apparently distributed more vaccines to people in the expensive neighborhoods and not enough for people in the poorer neighborhoods in Florida. So I hope they're investigating that, and that's a bit of a scandal. If you have control of the inventory, and that's what you should choose to do, to help your friends and sacrifice the poor, especially if you just give it to your friends, even if they don't need it, because you just make it available. Punto. The vaccine is available and it will be given to them, while other people will go lacking. So that's neither justice nor fair. And we thought by replacing the government in the White House, we thought that era of injustice and unfairness and racism and mistreatment and dislike for the poor, that era was over. Apparently in Florida, this governor DeSantis wants to continue that. I don't understand, and I don't understand the Hispanic senators, politicians from Florida, who don't respond to the needs of the Hispanic community. They act, the whole party anyway, right now, whole of GOP. So the bill was approved only with a Democratic vote. And this is money that will go around the country that would be for everybody, Democrat, Republican, Independent, it doesn't matter. The money will go to the people who qualify according to the parameters already established. And money is green. At that point, it doesn't mean anything that you're Republican or Democrat. And let's see what happens, because it could be helping a lot of people around this country, helping them out of poverty. A little more about that, because I want to comment on that because I've seen a couple of debates about how the money is targeted and how it could do greater good it could really have an impact if it was targeted in a certain way, not the way necessarily that it's being targeted right now, which by the way is 100% better of whatever was done before with Mr. Trump's tax break. Um, so it's obvious, and unfortunately, Governor Cuomo got in trouble, and so we don't know where that's going to end up. But I bring his name up because initially, when the COVID virus took over the country, he seemed to be the voice of reason. He was the one politician, the one nationally known political we could trust, and he had this conference every day explaining the advance of the virus, the advance of the protective equipment, uh, more or less statistics from not only from New York, but as much as he knew about vaccine, etc. Um, and one of the things he said, which made perfect sense, was that there was a need, an immediate need, to open the schools. So that's one way for parents to be able to go to work. Very sensible uh, decision by the government. Very reasonable expectation. You provide parents with the opportunity to work, then immediately that has an impact on the economy, on the economic recovery, and it has an impact on the income for the family, etc., etc. And so, with that in mind, that's how we should look at this large disbursement of $1.9 trillion. A lot of that is, no doubt, going to help with COVID, a couple of billion, going to help the fight against the virus. A lot of that will go to small businesses, and a good chunk of that money, as I said, will go to individuals in the form of checks that will arrive, help to the states, and so on. Critics, people who were opposed to this, say that it needs to be targeted properly, and complaints exist already that it's not going to the people who need it. There's no reason, some argue, to give so much money to people who make 150,000 or more. So I have a couple of things to say about that. But in the meantime, we're going to take a short break here in Usa la Media, the Roundtable. Desde el corazón de la ciudad del amor fraternal, les habla Fernando Méndez. Dani Ramos controlando la máquina digital. Regresamos en un momento.
Saludos amigos, los invitamos a escuchar La Mesa Redonda, The Roundtable, donde discutimos los temas del día, hablando de política, educación y otros temas, locales, regionales y mundiales, por USA la Radio. Saludos amigos, los invitamos a escuchar La Mesa Redonda, The Roundtable, donde discutimos los temas del día, hablando de política, educación y otros temas, locales, regionales y mundiales, por USA la Radio.
Hi, Danny. Can you hear me?
You can start talking now.
Señoras y oyentes de Usa la Media, estamos aquí de nuevo con su programa La Mesa Redonda de Roundtable desde el corazón de la ciudad del amor fraternal. Les habla Fernando Méndez, Dani Ramos controlando la máquina digital. Bueno, estamos hablando de la vacuna, que ahora no solamente que hay más vacunas, que hay más compañías fabricando vacunas, sino que debe estar abundante. Y hay un comentario sobre lo que pasó en la Florida. El gobernador DeSantis le dio más inventario, un inventario más grande de vacuna a las gentes ricas de esa parte, bueno, esa parte de Estados Unidos donde hay un montón de gente que vive en barrios multimillonarios y aparentemente más de ellos han recibido vacuna que gentes en los barrios pobres, los barrios hispanos, barrios negros. Y eso a través del país también. No es solamente un rumor, sino que se ha demostrado en Maryland y en otras partes que el inventario se le ha dado más a blancos que a gentes de color. Bueno, eso es lo que el gobierno tiene que preocuparse de corregir. Eso no debía estar pasando. Una cosa que sucedió con esto de COVID, que sí le puso fin a un movimiento de la economía muy positivo que empezó con el gobierno de Obama y del cual cuando se montó en el tren el señor Trump empezó a tomar crédito por todos los avances económicos, por el mercado positivo, etc. Y bueno, pues como vimos más tarde, a pesar de que ya salió de la Casa Blanca, el mercado ha continuado en una dirección vertical, ha estado creciendo, particularmente lo que es de sectores de farma y otros sectores de especulación sobre otros renglones de la economía. Y con respecto a eso, lo que se espera es que cuando, y ahora eso es otra cosa que no sabemos, cuándo va a llegar estos cheques a cada individuo, que eso tendrá un efecto, eso sí tiene un efecto. Hay estadísticas de que en los años en los meses en que esos cheques han sido distribuidos, creo que el último fue diciembre del 20 de enero o febrero del 21, que eso se vio en la economía, en un empuje a la economía con más gente, con empleos, más inversiones, la gente gasta cuando tiene el dinero. No como las compañías grandes. ¿Qué hicieron las compañías grandes? Cuando tienen un superávit, cuando tienen dinero de sobra, empiezan a comprar sus propias acciones. Así que es muy diferente. Eso no es lo que pasa cuando la gente pobre, la clase media, la gente pobre recibe, por medio americano que recibe un cheque, nosotros nos gastamos ese dinero, lo que sea, lo que sea para pagar arriendo que está atrasado, para pagar una tarjeta de crédito, etcétera. Se gasta el dinero, nadie lo va a poner debajo de un colchón. Pero la sorpresa para muchos en el más reciente resultado es que la economía agregó 379,000 empleos en el mes de febrero y que unos 3 de cada 4 fueron empleos en las economías de servicio, de hospitalidad que llaman. y que también resulta de que hay más vacunas, que hay más, que ahora con la esperanza de que va a llegar más dinero, inclusive los comerciantes pequeños empiezan a gastar dinero que ya saben les va a llegar y empieza todo a moverse inmediatamente. ¿Sí? El temor, como siempre, de los economistas es que se recaliente el asunto de la economía y que resulte en inflación, etcétera, y tasas de interés más altas que en este momento son increíblemente bajas. A ver por cuánto tiempo permanecen así, ¿no? Esos números bajos de promedios. But I do have a note again about the vaccine rollout and the recovery. Recovery requires addressing economic inequities. As I mentioned in Spanish, most people, middle class and poor people who receive these checks will spend them. The contrast with that money, which would never trickle down from the tax break Mr. Trump gave to his people, those guys just bought their own stock. So they have given an example of the richest companies buying their own stock because that's how they wanted to use the money. It never really many of those millions never trickle down to the rest of us. More on the national scene, two things, two sort of well-known people, which at this point, for me, represent sort of the conscience of the Republican Party on one side, and the lack of spine, the lack of respect for decency and democracy on the other side. So, Cindy McCain, she's the widow of Senator John McCain. She just said one thing that makes perfect sense. And she says the party, the GOP, should listen to what the voters want. We see every day, we see that they are not listening. They are listening to that very small group of people, the people who follow Trump. And that's their base, and that's the people that scares them. That vote back home, that's what scares them. And so what she's saying is they should listen to the people because at this point, 3 out of 4 Americans want the relief bill that just passed. And a similar number won the vaccination. And 60% of the people right now think President Biden is doing a good job. Those numbers, Mr. Trump never saw. In fact, those numbers are rare even for most presidents. But so that's one example of the one side of the Republican Party, Senator McCain. And the other one is Senator Lindsey Graham. There's something wrong with this man. Some disconnect, some mental compartmentalization, compartment where he breaks something into this is what I believe, and my conscience has no idea, but this is what I'm going to say. Trump is good. Trump is good for the party. Trump is going to win. People who don't believe in him are wrong. So it's a mindset where he actually sold his soul to Donald Trump. This is what he said. There is something about Trump, he said. The dark side and then the magic. So Lindsey Graham says that Trump has a bad side, but he has a magic side. So that immediately put me in mind of the time that he predicted that the virus that was attacking this country would disappear by April like magic. And he did this gesture with his hand on top of his desk like magic. It would flow away. Um, so uh, I don't know. I don't think that's exactly what Lindsey Graham means, but he certainly thinks that Trump has some magic potion, magic power. And so, yeah, the last week, the other quote from Lindsey Graham, equally um, equally humbling. He said that he was grateful that he liked Donald Trump, and that he was grateful that he allowed Senator Graham to be in his life, in Trump's life. I guess he means playing golf, flying a Trump airplane. I don't know. Does Trump still have a plane? I guess he does. Because for the 4 years he was president, he had Air Force One. But we know he had a plane before that, with a huge, obviously, the huge letters on the side of the plane that said Trump. I think that, by the way, it's falling into disuse. Buildings do not want to see the name Trump at the top. Many owners, tenants of buildings that had the name have campaigned to get rid of it, and so many have succeeded. And we know about Atlantic City and the last property with the Trump name that was blown up recently, the Taj Mahal, I believe. Anyway, so the man, the smartest man in the room, because he thinks he's a stable genius. I don't know. We're still talking about this guy. Anyway, because this stable genius managed to destroy the Republican Party. Because that's what Graham says. He could make the party bigger, stronger, more diverse. He could also destroy it. So I think that's what he's doing right now. Señores oyentes de USA la Media, les habla Fernando Méndez aquí desde la Mesa Redonda en el corazón de la ciudad del amor fraternal. Dani Ramos controlando la máquina digital. Regresamos en un momento.
Saludos amigos, los invitamos a escuchar La Mesa Redonda, The Roundtable, donde discutimos los temas del día, hablando de política, educación y otros temas, locales, regionales y mundiales, por USA la Radio.
Señores oyentes de USA la Radio, estamos aquí de nuevo con su programa La Mesa Redonda, The Roundtable, desde el corazón de la ciudad del amor fraternal. Les habla Fernando Méndez, Danny Ramos controlando el tablero. So I was talking about two people, headlines. Cindy McCain, widow of Senator McCain, a true hero, not to Trump, but a hero to the rest of us. And Senator Lindsey Graham, not a hero, a snake, a wimp who went to Mar-a-Lago to sort of worship at the feet of his idol, just like Kevin McCarthy and so on. Anyway, this is the sad part for the Republicans, okay? I don't know what effect this will have on them in terms of the vote, because the experts were saying that this midterm could be a time when the party out of power can capture seats. So that means Republicans will have an opportunity to get more seats in Congress and change the balance. But if the party is in the throes of Trumpism, I don't think it's going to capture anything. And the most clear and more visible example of what the Republicans are about is what just happened to this bill. That happened only because Democrats pushed for it and because they unanimously voted for it. And you had 49 votes. One of the senators, Republican senators, out. Private matter. He didn't vote, but it passed. It would have passed 51 to 50 or 50 to 49, but only Democrats approved it. So I want to imagine this, the election primaries in 2022 and the election in 2022, midterm elections. And I want to imagine the speeches, the commercials, the ads that Democrats can put out in terms of just take three things, okay? Let's take COVID, because COVID, the way it's going right now, COVID might be a thing of the past. 2022 is one of those things, looking back saying like, look what we did. Number two, the economic recovery, helped by a bill in which only Democrats voted for it. And you try to explain that to your voters, that you voted against their interests. You voted against distribution of money that would benefit millions of us, but also would benefit the economy. And so that could be a great commercial. Here you are. And put it in the context of how during the Trump era, they voted to protect less than 1% of the people at the top who made billions, and how during the Biden era, we have done something that would benefit millions of middle class and poor people. That comparison, take that to the people. And that's what they're saying, that the Republicans, as Cindy McCain saying, the Republicans are out of touch. And they're out of touch on so many ways, with the economy, with the reason to increase the national debt, but for a good reason, not to benefit their friends, and the vaccine that they fumbled, the Republican government fumbled and was not prepared, and so here we are with Biden taking the lead and doing tremendous things. I mean, Trump may still try to take credit for the fact that there were vaccines, but the vaccines started with or without his input. And that is going to be 2022. And the Democrats really need to be firm on the political front and realize the one thing that they can do to impose their desires, to have people vote for what they want, because they should keep in mind that if the shoe was on the other foot and McCain um, and excuse me, Mitchell uh, was leading the way, and it's only McCarthy and Mitchell in charge, that they would do everything possible to get their agenda across. They will step over their own mothers. They will do anything. Mitch McConnell is well known to be ruthless, and no, just think about a few things. The first of all, the fiscal plan that he passed, and then remember the other one when he opposed the judge one, and then when he supported another one, the last one that came on the Supreme Court, and he did that in a period in which people expected him to allow the incoming president to appoint a Supreme Court. He wanted a person of his like to be on a conservative, to be on the Supreme Court, and he pushed it through regardless of Democratic opposition. That is what they have to think about right now. Democrats should be concerned right now with the fact that they have the power and that they have to use it, not just that it's there because to make them feel good. Use it. And but this whole filibuster, if that is going to be the obstacle, and they call that, I don't know, sort of a scorched earth kind of decision. Some observers say it's a bad idea, blah, blah, blah. I ask you this, if the situation was reversed and it was McConnell right now, would he use his power? Would he do away with this filibuster which allows bills to linger and eventually die? So, no, he wouldn't. And so that's, you have the leadership right now. Unfortunately, they're not 100% united. The Democrats have a couple of fringe elements. One of them, well, it's not so bad, Bernie Sanders actually has been siding with the Democrats. That's helpful. He's still, rightly so, campaigning for the minimum wage. The minimum wage. Think about that. Minimum wage at $7.25, whatever the amount is right now. Okay, minimum wage at that fee, it probably means $15,000 a year for people in the service industry. Maybe more if you take tips into account. Maybe more if you take overtime into account. That is not a living wage, especially if you have a wife and a child, especially for some of these poor people that have more than one child. And so that's not a living wage. 15,000, anything under 20,000, how is that a living wage? Even more than that. So some states have been able to do it. Florida is one of them. California do it at 15, and 15 is still for many people that's still not enough. I mean, if you want to work for some of these companies close to the cities, your living arrangements, just living quarters are more expensive than you would think. So 15 per hour is still not extraordinarily generous. Many companies that want to attract people will pay $20 and $21 per hour. So we are so far from creating a just environment for the poor, a just fair pay, not to even address some of the other issues that have plagued us for decades now about how farmers who come from Mexico and Guatemala to work, seasonal workers who went to California and Texas, Arizona to pick the crops, and then many of them go back home most of them go back home. And the horrible living conditions for them in many of those fields, where they can rent a house and made for 5 or 6 people, and you have 20 residents, because that's how they can afford to live in these houses. So that there's all kinds of unfairness in the system, but at the bottom of it, minimum wage, a living wage, pay every human being a living wage. That there's another aspect that immediately hits me. That is a study that says that if every corporation paid their due taxes, that there wouldn't be any need for charity. Think about that. If they all paid taxes as they are really obligated to pay, there would not be any need for charity. We might still have it, but it would not be such an essential component. So, anyway, so many things. And I think, is it today? March 8th, International Women's Day. International Women's Day. So there were a couple of items in BBC website about women working. It said, we women are pushed out of work because of childcare. International Women's Day on March 8th has become a day to celebrate how far women have come in society, while also raising awareness of continued inequality. In the US, women say they have been hit hardest at work during the pandemic, with their participation in the workforce at a 33-year low. We hear that 2 women who lost their jobs early on in the pandemic, and they haven't worked since. So we hear 2 women. So, okay, so many issues that affect minorities and women in particular, who have been exploited by the system in so many ways. So on this day, International Women's Day, it's a good moment to bring attention to the plight of women. So we're going to take a very brief pause in Usa la Media, the Roundtable. Les habla Fernando Méndez. Dani Ramos controlando la máquina digital. Regresamos en un momento.
Saludos amigos, los invitamos a escuchar la Mesa Redonda, The Roundtable, donde discutimos los temas del día, hablando de política, educación y otros temas, locales, regionales y mundiales, por USA la Radio.
Señoras y señores de USA la Media, estamos aquí de nuevo con su programa La Mesa Redonda, The Roundtable, desde el corazón de la ciudad del amor fraternal. Les habla Fernando Méndez, Dani Ramos controlando la máquina digital. And I was talking about International Women's Day, a moment to sort of reflect on the value of women to our society. And one thing that comes to mind is a play that the 1812 comedy troupe was preparing, Tyndale Place. That's the name of the play. That has to do with the fact that women at a time of war, in World War II, I believe is what it was, were drafted into the factories while the men went to war. The women went to make things, that machines for war. And so there's a famous song. It's a great song with a central theme in that play. I make missiles. And the place of puts the plight of women at that point in perspective. So they were useful during the war. They were very active. They were involved. They were part of the whole effort. And then the men come home and they lose their jobs and go back to being housewives. Of course, that was a sort of a snapshot of a certain era, the 1950s. But in so many ways, it's true that women have had have played a secondary role in the society, when in reality, they are so important to our everyday life. I mean, they take care of the children, yes, early on. Fortunately, more men in the new generations, more men are involved in the day-to-day care of babies and so on. And it's not just a caricature, like, no, it's not assumed that a wife will have to stop working to take care of the child. And that's why you have, if you have the ability to have a place for the babies to be while you go to work. So that's one of those things, again, in the same context as the vaccination. More people are vaccinated, we acquire that herd immunity, we will be in better shape. Every time I said herd immunity, remember that Mr. Trump said herd mentality, as though it was just a state of mind. If you belong to the herd. So, I don't know what he was talking about. Anyway, International Women's Day. So it's a good time to bring attention to struggle women have had to get equal pay, for instance. And why so many of them bore the brunt of the initial attacks by the virus, more women, because they are in the service industry, hotels, restaurants. And remember also that they had to work very hard, because so many of them are nurses in all these hospitals that were receiving the people who came in with the virus. So hats off to our women who lend us valuable services every day in so many ways, from teaching to nursing to just being mothers, just keeping the home fire while their husbands go to work. It's a thankless job for many of them, not recognized properly, but there you are. But more and more, women have gained respect and acceptance in terms of careers and all that. And more women, in fact, are enrolled in colleges. They outnumber men in enrollments in colleges and universities. So that's a good sign that future generations of women are just not going to be relying on men to support them. I don't know what that feminist streak came today, but I guess only because I read about International Women's Day, but also because of the recent headline about the closing of Berks, the detention center, immigration detention center. And that was an issue that I had pursued for weeks and weeks. I don't remember exactly. It could have been more than a year, maybe. My friend Emma Restrepo and Victor Negron, Pedro Rodriguez were on my show with me, and we were addressing that issue. Emma had a contact inside the prison, and she called us regularly, almost every Saturday, and we get updates about what it was. And the most outrageous part of that whole thing was that Jay Johnson, Secretary of Homeland, said that they were only there for 20 days, and that the government was fulfilling that part of their obligation. Well, not true at all. I could have gone through the TV when he said that, because he said it very calmly and convincingly, and you sort of know that that's not true, immediately. And it's like so frustrating, because there's nothing you can do except, here we are, inform people. All we have to do is inform people. And when politicians complain that the media is hard on them, well, we're not hard enough. I mean, they get away with a lot of stuff because many of us do not know how to pursue the truth, to look for the truth behind their rhetoric, their lies. And well, we know that there's so many of them are just evasive. So anyway, and then the last item in the same context is that migrants right now are headed for the US, and they're being held back and beaten in Guatemala as they try to cross the border into Mexico on their way to the United States. So I don't know if we are assisting the government in Guatemala to stop the migrants, to not to allow them to cross into Mexico. I would not be surprised that there is some agreement, U.S. Guatemala government, about what to do, keep them on that side of the border. And would that, if there was an agreement with the Trump administration, let's say, would that hold during the Biden years? So here's the story for Biden. He has one of the most difficult presidencies in our history, facing the virus that destroyed the economy, with the need to rebuild the system, the infrastructure, to deal with a recalcitrant Republican Party that doesn't believe in cooperation, bipartisanship. And he has a very slim majority in both houses. So his task is to do what he's doing and do it well. And let's see what happens on the other side. See if the public responds to a government that shows responsibility and discipline and respect justice and human rights. Bueno, señores amigos de Úsala Media, hemos llegado al final de esta otra edición de la Mesa Redonda. Les habla Fernando Méndez, Dani Ramos controlando la máquina digital. Los esperamos hasta la próxima.
Saludos amigos, los invitamos a escuchar La Mesa Redonda, The Roundtable, donde discutimos los temas del día, hablando de política, educación y otros temas, locales, regionales y mundiales, por Úsala Radio.
Okay, Danny,